Carrie Hyde, and I am the host of my very own Your Pet's Life Coach Facebook Live. And I am always very, very excited to come on and talk to you guys. But tonight, I wouldn't exactly call it excited. I'm a little, I'm always nervous when I talk about things that can be scary to talk about, hard to talk about, can definitely affect myself and my business. And, but I mostly want to talk about it because it affects animals deeply and their companions that take care of them, what they have to go through. So as you noticed, I posted a little thing talking about a situation that has come up in my area, but it's also a situation, sorry, I'm turning my phone off. It's also a situation where it is happening all over the country. But before we get into it, because I want to allow people some time to get in and I don't want to get straight into it, let me just give you guys a little background on me in case you're new to following me or just aren't quite sure. So again, my name is Carrie Hyde. I am the owner of the Spaw, and I was a vet tech for 12 years. And I run the doggy daycare, boarding, grooming. We do nutrition, obviously, as a certified pet nutritionist. Hopefully, I'm teaching people about nutrition. But today, as people are coming on, please feel free to ask any questions about anything if you want. But I really want to focus on tonight's episode being about protecting our animals in ways that we wouldn't even realize that we need to or hadn't considered it being a problem. And so we're going to talk a lot about doggy daycares and boarding facilities and some of the setbacks and the benefits of them and some things you need to keep your eyes open for, what you're looking for, what questions to ask. Why do things happen in doggy daycares that we hear are horrible, and if there's a way we can prevent them. So we're going to talk a lot about that. I also want you to know I used to be involved in an organization called Joey's Legacy. And even though I'm not involved in this organization anymore, I still really encourage people to get involved with it if you have the time and you can do it. Joey's Legacy is an organization that is fighting really hard to get your animals to be seen as companions and not property. So currently right now, each state, every state in the United States considers your dog property. So if something happens to them and somebody is negligent for it, their only responsibility is what the property, as they like to call our lovely pets, what the property is worth, right? So if I get my car damaged, then what is my car worth? And so they kind of consider your dog to be very similar to that of a car or a coffee mug, for that matter. And it's pretty disgusting. But there is some controversy in and of that, right? Because some people think, well, what are we going to do? We can't have it be the same as a child, but there is a little middle ground, I think, even though we do consider our animals our children, there is a little bit of middle ground. And so Joey's Legacy is fighting really hard to try to get those laws changed. And if you can support that organization, and I only bring that up because of the topic that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm going to jump into this a little bit, and I know it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable, especially if I have people watching me who own doggy daycares or boarding facilities or grooming shops or veterinarian hospitals, dog walkers, anybody, dog trainers, anybody who is involved in taking care of a dog or a cat for that matter. It might be a really uncomfortable topic to talk about because a lot of us just want to kind of not talk about it and keep it kind of in the background. But I can guarantee you that as much as we don't want to talk about it and we just kind of put it in the back of our heads because it's more comfortable there, I would tell you probably the number one thing, at least for me and for my friends I do have friends who own doggy daycares, probably the number one thing that is so scary to us from a doggy daycare standpoint or a boarding standpoint is a dog dying in our facility. And if we're doing doggy daycare, we're always fearful of one animal hurting another animal. And so it becomes a topic that you either talk a lot about and keep it in the forefront, or it's one that you just kind of don't want to talk about because it's too awful to think about needing to call that pet parent and tell that pet parent that something like this has happened. And I've had to make that call. And it was not through an animal getting mauled or injured or that kind of thing. But I did have a dog. You guys all know I talk about it a lot. I did have a dog die from having a heart attack in my facility. And so it is very, very scary to think that this can happen. And it certainly can happen. It can happen anytime that we put animals together in a room. Things can happen. And I have had dogs. I'm fortunate, I will say. I have had dogs nip at each other and bite at each other. And one of my worst cases I had was not too long ago, and it was two small dogs. So nobody died, which is great, because God only knows, especially. And I'll just tell you, her little name is Poppy, and she is just one of the most beautiful little Yorkies, and she got bit by another little dog about the same size as her, but it left a really big bite wound on her, and it's awful. And she's such a sweet dog. I mean, she never does anything, but on that particular day, I don't know, the dogs that we've been taking care of forever can have moments of, I'm in a bad mood, just like people can, and something makes them mad, or I don't know, the wind blows. And so these things can happen, and they do happen, even in the best of situations. But sometimes those best situations are not being provided in doggy daycares and boarding and daycare and even vet hospitals. A lot of times people think they're going to board their dog at a vet hospital because somehow they're safer there. And I can assure you, coming from someone who's worked at several veterinarian hospitals, that is not always the case. And sometimes it's even worse. Sometimes it's the vet is too busy dealing with surgeries, and I can only imagine the stress they have on them, right? Like, I need to worry about saving this dog's life. The last thing they're going to be doing is paying attention to whether somebody in doggy daycare is getting along. So it becomes kind of up to you guys as best you can. And that's what I'm going to be here for today. Hopefully you guys will have some questions, and we can lead this into a really good discussion. I'm not here to bash doggy daycares, boarding facilities, veterinarians, groomers. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to tell you that there is a huge problem in the industry, in the pet industry, and it continues to be a problem, and it will always be a problem. There is nothing, trust me, if I thought there was something that could be done and fixed across this country, I would sign up and give them all my money to fix it now. But it can't be fixed. And the reason why it can't be fixed is because year after year after year, newer, younger people are coming into it. And unfortunately, most people, human nature is that until it happens to them, they don't think that it will happen. And so they don't make the change until it happens to them. And that's why I say it will continue to happen, because I tell my staff all the time, when I want them to, like newer staff, and I'm training them and I want them to learn something, I say, I'm not saying this because I think it will happen. I'm saying it because I know it will happen. And that comes from years of experience of working in different places and being around it and seeing what's going on. So just to kind of let you guys know why we're talking about this tonight, very recently for those of you who don't know, and if you're local, I encourage you to go, because when I do these orientations, they are actually in-person orientations. I have a little classroom at the spa, and we fit about 25 people in this room. And I do a whole orientation. And what that does is explain to you the process of going through a grooming, and what to expect, what not to expect, what we could do for you. And we go over everything. And it's stuff that I always tell people, this is stuff you can take everywhere, because not all grooming shops are the same, but we do definitely have similarities. And so I try to teach people. But anyway, in my last orientation, a gentleman was, you could tell, actively upset. And he had, I don't know if he actually saw the situation. It sounded like that's what happened, that he was picking up his dog, and a dog was getting rushed out of a grooming and daycare facility. And I think he was being rushed, I would imagine, to the hospital. And then later it was found out that it was a little tiny dog, and the little dog, somehow, I don't know, I wasn't there. And I'm not here to bash this place. I wasn't there. But somehow a dog got into an area where the little dogs were, or this little dog was, and he unfortunately uh, was able to kill the little dog. And so the little dog lost his life. I don't know his name, or I would definitely give him some respect, but I don't know. But the little dog did definitely lose his life. And it's awful. I cannot imagine what the owner or that poor dog went through, what the owner, I just can't even imagine it. And yet it keeps happening. It's not the first time. It's not going to be the last time that this happens. And so I'm going to be here to kind of help you guys see what you can do and what we can do. If you do own a daycare, a boarding facility, a grooming, or that, hopefully you're listening, because I'm going to give you some really valuable advice. But one thing I would say is that we could keep our dogs in a little bubble, but I don't know that that's the right thing. And I'm certainly not here to suggest that. I'm not suggesting that we take all of our dogs and they never get to do doggy daycare and they never get to go into a nice free run boarding facility. I'm not suggesting that. But what I am suggesting is that we can do better. We can do better both as pet parents, as providers of the boarding and the daycare and the grooming. We can do better. And we need to. We absolutely need to. As a society, we need to get some laws taken up and passed. We need to stick to them, and we need to be diligent in the care that we give to these animals. And so that's what we're going to be talking about. So I will tell you, I think the two reasons, I think they're really the only two reasons that this type of thing happens. Number one, unfortunately, I think that money and costs become a big reason as to why this kind of thing happens. I see time and 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 time again, not enough staff to the number of dogs that are in an area being taken care of. Just simply not enough staff. There's not enough eyes watching out over these animals. So when something happens, let's take an example of a dog who's about to attack another dog. If there's enough people there and they're really being diligent in their job and their work and they're trained, they should notice it ahead of time. They should be able to notice it. But if you don't have enough people there, there's a good possibility that nobody sees anything or knows what's going on at all. So that is, I think, sorry, I thought I had turned my phone off and I didn't. So I'm horrible. So number one, I think there is just simply not enough staff. And so as somebody who owns a doggy daycare or boarding or veterinary hospital, I'm going to encourage you guys to either raise your prices so you can hire the staff, because it is not worth the loss of a dog. And that is what is happening. It's not worth any of that. The cost, it's just not. So anyone with mine, too many bad things happen. And then there is the vaccine issue. Oh yeah, there's the vaccine issue, which we can talk about too. So number one, if you own a doggy daycare, you need to hire more staff. Stop it. Stop thinking that it's okay. Number two, if you're running a facility that is a grooming place, because I'm seeing this a lot, it's a dog grooming place and they just let the dogs kind of all run around, but there's no real person in charge of the daycare. So the groomers and the bathers and the receptionists are all kind of in charge, but nobody's really, really in charge. Hi, Lily. Hi, Melanie. So you, as a person, if you want to bring your dogs to doggy daycare, you want to find out that that is different. There is separate, because if the groomer is also responsible for the dogs that are all running around, trust me, she hasn't got her eye on anybody. She can't. It's impossible, or he can't. Sorry, I don't mean to be sexist. But so number one question, how many people are in charge of the dogs in doggy daycare? Not the groomer. You want to make sure that it is just people who are only in charge of watching those dogs. They're not checking in people. They're not checking out people. They're not answering phones. They're not doing all of that stuff. All they are there to do is to keep an eye on your dogs. That's super important. And then you want to know how many people are doing it. And that's going to vary for how many dogs, how many big dogs versus little dogs. Little dogs are much easier, and also the risk is much lower with little dogs. They're, like I told you, I had one of my dogs got bit. This was several months ago, but it was a bite wound, and Poppy ended up being okay, but it it was a pretty good bite wound, and it happened quick, and it was a snap, and then we were able to separate them. That's part of the problem with the big dogs, is that I used to do doggy daycare for large dogs. I don't anymore. We only do little dogs for daycare and boarding. We only have the little guys. We do grooming for large dogs, but we don't do doggy daycare for them. But I used to have the large dogs, and we wouldn't allow my later time. Good. I'm glad. Yeah. I go back and forth, because if I go too late, then when I bring on some of the vets from back east, they're up so late. So we're going back and forth. But I think I'm more and more kind of gearing myself up to do a lot of these by myself and talk about some of the issues that I burn inside me that I want to talk about and help people. So good. I'm glad you like it, Lily. So, getting that staff to ratio is important, because when I used to have the large doggy daycare, uh, we would take in 10 large dogs only, and we had a very high staff to ratio. And even with that, I was nervous. Even with that, I was nervous. And that was on a third of an acre of land. And I just would always think, because I did have a situation where I had three large dogs in a room, and one large dog on the other side of the room. And it was just there was just us there. It was just me and technically four dogs, large dogs. And believe it or not, the golden retriever got into a fight with a Rottweiler. And you're going to laugh when I tell you who broke that fight up. So it was actually me over there trying to break up a Rottweiler but that I have a lot of experience. So I'm trying to break up between the Rottweiler and the golden retriever. And guess who comes to my rescue? The pit bull. The pit bull was not having any of that, because he could sense my energy. So he went over there, and actually her name was Penelope. Penelope like jumped up off the couch, got up to the fence, and was just like and they broke it up, and she managed to get that whole fight broken up. So it was pretty awesome. But my whole point is that large dogs are much different. The damage can be much worse, and it's really hard for people to break those fights up, right? You don't want to get some young 15, not anybody, but a lot of times these places they're hiring people who are straight out of high school, and they just don't have the experience to break up a fight like that. So that's why I say it's so important to know what the ratios are. How many people, what is their training? What do they do if there is a fight? What can you do? Because in this case that I'm talking about, for a large dog to get a little dog in his mouth would be really hard if he's in attack mode, to get the little dog out of his mouth. So number one, I guess easily, is make sure that there is a division. There is absolutely a division between large dogs and small dogs. Number two, what are they going to do? What's the policy? What can they do? How are they going to break up a fight? Do they have something there in order to stop it? If they're taking in large dogs, if you have large dogs on the property, there needs to be some pretty serious ability to break up those fights, because sometimes you can't do it with your fingers. And in the meantime, another dog is going to get injured. So you want to make sure. So number one, I think one of the reasons that these happen is because of the staff ratio and business owners not wanting to put the money out in order to protect these animals from getting injured. And number two, I think, is complacency. And I see this all too often. And I remind myself probably on the daily for that not to happen to me. Do not get complacent. I say to myself all the time, Carrie, don't get complacent. Don't get complacent. And what I mean by that is that you take care of animals so much. Yeah. Oh yeah. Staying at your house. Yeah. That's always a good one. In fact, people ask me all the time, what is the best place for my animal? And they're surprised when I tell them, look, if you have somebody that you trust, and there's a whole nother thing I can talk about that, because some of the worst cases I've seen when I was with Joey's Legacy was actually through, and I'm not to call them out, but so I won't call out the name of the company, but the little apps on your phone. I've seen some of the worst cases coming out of there. So it's hard, and you have to know all these questions and what to ask and what to do. And going to someone else's house, I think, is probably, I don't want to say one of the worst, but kind of one of the worst, because you don't know who else is in that house. You could meet the girl or the guy and they could seem great, but little do you know, back home where your dog's going to get dropped off is grandma who might have dementia, right? And then she leaves the door open and God knows. So going to someone else's home, I think, is probably one of your worst ideas to do, even though it may seem like it's one-on-one. I like it. You just don't know what else is going on. And I've seen some horrible cases there. So I'm glad you brought that up, Crystal, because, but coming to your home, absolutely, right? Absolutely. If you have somebody that you can trust and you know that they're actually going to be there, because I've heard that too, where we had a case a while back where, so this is a little advice, kind of side note. If you're having somebody come to your home to check on your animals, I've heard of this more than once and probably several times, I could say, where they set it all up with the caregiver to come to the house, and then the caregiver forgets or gets overbooked and couldn't get there, and all sorts of stuff has happened. So I recently had a situation where somebody was telling me that they hired the teenager right next door to come and feed, I think, it was two schnauzers. It was two dogs. It was two schnauzers. And I think it was like for 3 days or 4 days. She never went once. Not one time did she show up. And so, and then when they got home, thank God the dogs were fine. I'm sure they were hungry, and there was pee and poop all over their house. Thank God they were alive though. But so I guess my point to that is, if you're going to have somebody come to your house, please check on them every single day and make sure that they're actually going. Like, find something, whether you insist on pictures or something, because a lot of times people are doing this as a side job, and those side jobs are no bueno. Like, it can be very, very tragic when they're getting overwhelmed trying to do too many side jobs. So that's my side note on that. But complacency, guys, that's another reason. So if you do run a doggy daycare, a boarding facility, any of those, please do not get complacent with your animals or someone else's animals, because their lives depend on it. So when you're working in this environment, I'm not guilty of following through with complacency, but I've had to catch myself where I'm like, oh, just this one. And then I stop myself. Nope, not going to do it. Not this one time. I'm not letting him in. He's too big, or whatever it is, And sometimes we'll have owners tell us, he's fine. He plays with little dogs all the time. I promise you, he's going to be fine. He's going to be fine. And you want to, but then I think, I have an option here. I can make this client really happy and feel really great, or I can make them upset, which is going to stink. But when it comes down to the animal, I have to protect the animal, and I'm not about to get complacent right now and just be like, it should be fine. We're not that busy today. It should be fine. All of those things come into your head. So it's very similar. My husband always uses this example, so I use it too, because we used to drive up to Big Bear Mountain, which is outside of my house, a couple hours. And you talk about driving up that mountain. Every day you drive up that mountain, and every day you drive up that mountain 60 miles an hour. And even though the speed limit says 45, you're doing 60, and nothing's ever happened until that one time something happened. And that's what happens in doggy daycare. And strangely, when I interview groomers, I always ask them one question: have you ever cut a dog? If they tell me no, then I'm like, that's coming, and it's going to happen here. You're going to cut a dog, which is not that it's okay, but when bad things happen, hopefully people learn from them and they don't do them again. It's the people who get away with it over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And then finally, I would suspect that this situation with this dog is due to complacency and the lack of people being there. I don't know for sure. I wasn't there, so I'm not trying to call, but complacency of like, oh, it should be fine. It'll be okay. No big deal. We've done it before, all of those things, and not enough people watching over them. And then we saw a bear. Oh my gosh. We were going to the park just like a normal day, and then we saw a bear. Oh yeah. I thought I was like, I got it, Lily. Sorry. No, exactly. Like, things can happen and out of nowhere. They just happen. And but when is it the negligence of the boarding facility, the daycare, the groomer, the veterinarian, the dog walker, all of that? When is it their fault? Like a dog walker, right? Oh, I always walk them with the leash just on my pinky. They're fine until that one time when something like a bear scares the dog and then he goes running down. So don't get complacent, and make sure that when you're communicating to your boarding, daycare, grooming, all of that, that you find out, like, how strict are they on the rules? It matters. it matters. Are they just kind of willing to bend them every once in a while? You want them to be strict on them. You want them to have, like, I tell my clients all the time, when you call me on Christmas Eve and want me to board your dog, and you've been coming here for, the entire time I've been here, 22, 23 years, and I tell you no, you're going to hate me. But you should actually really be thankful that I'm willing to lose someone so valuable to my business in order to protect all of the animals that are already in my care. So how strict are they on the rules? Because that's going to tell you whether they're being complacent or not. Well, I'm gone. I'd rather they were safe. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you just don't know, but we also have to be really careful about that bubble, because doggy daycares, I can tell you how many times doggy daycares have been so beneficial to animals, so beneficial. And so I don't want to put anybody in this situation where they're like, I don't want to go to doggy daycare. This is awful. Carrie's right. I can't trust, I can't this, I can't that. I would say this: if you have a small dog, do not go to a place where the large dogs are hanging out with the small dogs. You got to be sure of that. Like, you really got to be sure of that. And because if not, you're like, they're sleeping in the same rooms with them, whatever. You're at a much higher risk the more large dogs that are there. The other thing is large dogs have an energy that they really can put off when they're playing, and that can create an environment. So you got to be really, really careful. Make sure that wherever you're going and your dogs are free run, if they're running around, that your little dogs are with little dogs. It's just an absolute. And you got to be careful too. What does little dog mean? Like, so many people are like, oh yeah, he's little. No, like, I've seen 4-pound dogs with, 25-pound dogs. And I don't think a 25-pound dog is really necessarily going to, like, fully be able to kill a dog that quick, so long as there's enough people there. But you got to be careful what that means. Like, I will take my little teeny dogs that are blind, those kind of dogs. Those dogs don't even go. It's not fair. They're not on a level playing field. So we separate, our old senior, we even have a place called the senior center. And in the senior center, I might have 3 or 4 seniors that are just in their own individual beds and not doing anything. So questions to ask, guys, when you're bringing your dogs to boarding facilities are going to be, how many staff do you have here? If it's large dogs, honest to God, it's not just about how many staffs, but what training do they have? How do they break up a fight? Ask these questions. And even if they don't have the answers, maybe you're going to plant a seed to somebody who's like, yeah, what do we do I've heard a couple people say a couple of years ago, I had hired a new girl, and I love her, by the way. But she had come from another facility that I won't name, but you've all heard of it. She came from another facility, and we were talking about, in one of our meetings, we were talking about how to break up fights and what to do to protect yourself and to protect the animals, and how do you break it up if it happens. And she had mentioned that the other place said that they are supposed to do what's called the wheelbarrow effect, which I had never heard of, and frankly, I was like, what is that? What wheelbarrow effect? What is that? And she said, it's when 2 dogs are fighting, you grab the back legs of the aggressor and pull up like a wheelbarrow. So he loses his grip, I guess, or whatever. To be honest with you, at that moment, I was appalled. I could not believe, first and foremost, she's going to injure that dog. Secondly, she's going to get bit. Like, you take a dog like that in that kind of a situation, that dog's going to turn around and bite her. So it was awful. With each other, 6, 15, 17, and 20 pounds, young and old. I taught them to respect each other. Oh, yeah. Yeah, respect is important. And that's part of the problem, is that when you're putting them into a new pack, respect has to take place. And sometimes that requires a quick little bite and a quick little this and that. But when it's big dogs and little dogs, a lot of times it can be, prey that they think that is some kind of a prey type situation. So anyway, they would break up the fights apparently with a wheelbarrow effect. That's awful, 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 awful. That's not what we do. So make sure they're getting some training. What do we do? People ask me, we really don't have these big dogs at the spa that we need to worry about. But in the event, like sometimes because we do grooming for big dogs, so sometimes we might have two golden doodles, and if they kind of start looking at each other with their mouth up or something, we just get in between them and back the aggressor up, away from, with our body, not with our hands, because that's where we get bit. I can show if anybody ever wants. Maybe I'll do a video on it, but that's how we deal with the situation. And then somebody comes and takes the dog who is being bullied, let's call it. One thing you never want to do, I will tell you guys, never ever want to do. I know it's instinct to do it, but a lot of times when you're out walking your dogs, or if you are in a situation like a doggy daycare and you're working there and a little dog is about to be attacked by a big dog, our first instinct, right, is to grab that little dog and get him up in our arms. But what ends up happening is the aggressor starts coming harder and faster at you. Usually the owner or the inexperienced person will end up falling. All sorts of stuff happens. So it can be really scary, but you really need to, at the aggressor and try to get him to back away, to get him to push away and to back away, with loud voices, make yourself big, those kind of things. And that's how nobody gets injured. If you have to use your back, those kind of things. So, but that's kind of more training. But you want to ask your doggy daycares, your boarding facilities, what training? What happens if a dog's coming after my dog? What are you going to do? We also have some loud noises that we can do. If I were working with large dogs now, if I had large dogs and that kind of situation, I would probably have, sorry, what a nerd, huh? But you have to, sometimes we have to be like, hey, knock it off. I can get my big boy voice on sometimes, and that's all that works. It works. I try to hide behind something when I see a large dog coming. Yeah, if they don't see you, you're even better off. But don't walk on retractable leashes, whatever you do. If you're out on retractable leashes and something, even a coyote comes after you, you're going to have a really hard time even getting your dog to a point where you can get between him and the aggressive dog. I always tell people, especially in my area, walk with a stick. Walk with a stick, because if you grab that little dog and try to pick him up, you're going to get hurt. There's a really good chance you're going to get bit. You're going to get hurt, and you might not even save your dog's life, because there's been cases where those big dogs will knock you down and still go after your dog. And now you're sitting there with a bleeding head and a broken arm and, whatever. And your poor little dog is still going to get injured. So walk with a stick, walk with the loud bull horns, walk with something. We have all that stuff. But like I said, we don't really work with big, large dogs anymore. So I don't have to worry about that. Walk with a stick. Always have some kind of stick with you. It's pretty easy, even if it's your broom and you look stupid walking down the street with a broom in your hand. Walk with something to defend yourself, because it's going to happen on that day when you don't have the stick. So always walk with your stick. The bullhorns are really good too. Coyotes, that scares them just enough time for you to get away. Bullhorns are really good thing to walk with. We keep those. I have a few of those around at the spa, different things that we can use in case we need to. But like I said, we don't have big dogs. You also want to make sure that your doggy daycare, this is another problem with doggy daycares and boarding facilities that are doing free run. How big is the facility? So let's just use an example. Let's just say that I have one room and it's separated by like a little gate. And on this particular day, I realized that I have an aggressive dog. Didn't know he was aggressive, which is very possible, guys. There are times when doggy daycare's been taking care of dogs forever, and then something snaps, and usually it's, an event that caused it, or believe it or not, sometimes it can be right after a rabies vaccine, which is why I have a 2-week waiting period for dogs coming in after vaccines. But all of a sudden a dog becomes aggressive. What can they do with that dog if that's the only room they have? And they got to call you on the phone. So if they don't have like extra rooms or kennels or things that they can put them somewhere, what are they going to do? They're probably not going to just stand there and hold the aggressive dog. So you want to make sure that they have access to other places. If they so when you were to walk into a doggy daycare, you would ask them, what if one of these dogs becomes aggressive? What would you guys do? Right? What happens? So you want to make sure carrying an umbrella with you can act like a shield. Oh yeah, that's a good one. I've heard that before too, where you pop the umbrella open real quick and then can act as a shield. That's a really good one. Thanks, Lily. Yeah, anything, you just want to make sure you have it with you. But making sure that your doggy daycare, your boarding facility has extra rooms, even if it's an office, even if it's someone's office that, or a kennel or something that they can separate and move these dogs. Cause I'm seeing a lot of like little grooming shops that are trying to do doggy daycare to make a couple extra bucks, especially here in Orange County. Well, it's probably all over the country, but right here in Orange County, paying the rent is getting really tough. And so that is starting to get people to do stuff that they probably shouldn't be doing. Taking in extra dogs that they shouldn't be taking in. So you want to make sure that there is a plan in place when you're going to doggy daycares in case a dog becomes aggressive, or 2 dogs or 3 dogs. They should have some extra kennels, something in place for that to happen, to protect them. You also, believe it or not, want to make sure that your doggy daycare, your boarding facility, I can't even believe I'm about to say this because I'm shocked at how much it happens. Do they know where the emergency room is? It's shocking to me. It's shocking to me how many mobile groomers don't know where the emergency room is. There should be a route that if something were to happen to your animal in one of these facilities, that every single person that works there knows where it is. Where is the closest veterinarian hospital or the closest emergency room, and what their hours are, which is why I want you to know where the emergency room is, because then you don't have to worry about the hours, because if it's an emergency, they can go straight there. But you want to make sure that they know. Believe it or not, like I told you, a lot of times people don't, until it happens to them, it doesn't even occur to them to open up a place like this and know exactly where the emergency room is. So you want to, when you're checking these places out, ask them, where's the emergency room? And I got to tell you, little hint, if I called a place right now and said, I'm thinking about bringing my dog to your doggy daycare, can you tell me where the closest emergency room is from your facility? How far away is it? If they say, oh, I don't know, I think it's off of like Grand and 6th Street, that is going to be somebody who's completely one of those people who I don't know until it happens to me. And you don't want that to happen to your dog for them to learn the lesson. So call around, ask those kind of questions. Fire safety, interesting. I love this one. Fire safety is so important, but here's the thing. Okay. So the animal shelter, the Orange County Animal Shelter, is the one that's in charge of mine. So they sent out a list for me to get my license. And on that, it asks me what my what the plan is in case of a fire. And so I thought, oh, that's interesting, because I do have a plan, but they had never asked me that. This is a new thing that they just started asking. And so I knew what all my plan is, but I thought, are they going to think this is awful? Like, are they looking for something else? Because my plan was so weird, but it is the only plan. And believe me, I am a problem solver, and I have looked and searched and tried to figure out how this would go down. So I ended up calling them, and I got their main girl on the phone, and I said, so, my plan, if there's a fire here, is for all of us to open up all the doors and then pull up our cars and then get as many dogs as we can into our cars. And she laughed and she goes, you are the first person to be honest about that. And I go, thank you. I mean, I'm thinking utter chaos. There's smoke, there's flames, there's fire. And thankfully, to be honest with you, I'm glad my dogs aren't all in cages, like in kennels, and because we do slumber party boarding. So our dogs are all out. We have 2 rooms. And so most of our dogs are we have a couple that we do have to separate. But most of the time it's just like 5 or 6 in one room and 5 and 6 are in another room. And then we have lots of doors. And so the plan for us was, if there's a fire, then each one of us that work there would go out a different door, leave it open, and then pull our cars up there and start collecting all the dogs. Because it's a weird thing to think, like, I can't have my staff staying in there. I know it sounds horrible, like staying in there and everybody dying. So we take as many as we can with us as we go, and then leave the doors open and then put them in the cars. And so she said that's exactly what they were looking for, is what would you do? Because the people who are saying, oh, well, we would get the chart out, and this is what she told me they were getting. We would get everybody's chart out, and then we would figure out which kennel they were in. And then after we knew which kennel they were in, we would make sure we went to kennel 1 through 27. No, you wouldn't. The place is on fire. No, you wouldn't. You can't. So So that is what my fire safety is that we grab our cars and we grab as many dogs as we can. And then we try to get everybody in our cars. And thankfully we're not on a main street. I got to tell you, that's the other thing that hate to call anybody out in that, but main street boarding and daycare and grooming facilities stress me out. I'm like, oh my God, if a dog got out, it's right on the busiest main street ever. I see those all the time and it stresses me out. Or if there's a fire and you have to leave doors open, then the dogs go run out into the middle of the street and get hit by a car. I'm such a worrywart. I think about all this stuff. So that might be a good place for you guys to board your dogs, somewhere where the owner is a worrywart, because I'm constantly thinking about that kind of stuff. But to a fault, it drives me crazy. And I don't want to put that fear in you guys, but it's stuff to think about. Like, what if my dog got out of that door and he's right next to the 405 freeway or whatever freeways by you? So you want to be really, really careful with that. But fire safety is definitely an important thing. However, knock on wood, right? I only know of about 2 incidences where fire had no, 3. I know of 3 incidences where fire had become in the whole US that I know of. I'm not saying there's not more. I'm sure there's more, but I only know of 3 boarding and daycare facilities that had ever had a fire issue. So it's definitely something to consider and think about. If they're burning candles, those kind of things. Like if you go into a boarding facility, never take vacations. Oh, I think I remember you telling me that one time, Lily, that you never take vacations. So if you walked into like a boarding facility, a daycare facility, any of those kind of facilities, and they're burning candles, it might be a good thing to think, this is probably going to be a fire hazard. If someone forgot to blow the candle out, if the candle fell on the ground, like there's all sorts of stuff. So pay close attention when you're walking into these facilities because a lot of these facilities are not, I have amazing staff, guys. So it's hard for me to say it like this because I'm so blessed with what I have. But we do hire young people and they're still learning and things can happen and it's not anybody's fault, but things can happen. So yeah, aside from that, you're right, Lily. I knew someone was going to bring it up, which is great. Aside from them breathing in the candles, and that kind of stuff, we have to be really careful. So I have an alert sensor here in the house, along with a dog who hates smoke and goes wiggle when she smells it. Okay, here's a funny, so let me tell you guys something. I have a really good friend of mine, like mine and my husband's best friend. And I hope he's listening to this. Sometimes he does. I hope, Jeff, you are listening to this. His name is Jeff. Jeff owns a fire alarm company. He manufactures, designs, like he's brilliant. Oh, I hope he didn't hear that. I don't want him to know I said that. But he's really smart. He's an engineer and he makes fire alarms for a living. That's what he does. And talk about stress. Imagine that, being responsible for people's lives, right? Well, I asked him one time, I said, hey, I need you I want you to create a fire alarm that when the fire alarm goes off, all the doors in the house open up so the dog can get out. Now, my husband used to be in the fire department. So right away, my husband's like, that's going to create more fire. And I'm like, I don't care. I want my dog and my cat to get out of the house. I want all the doors and bells and whistles. I want everything to open. The garage door, everything needs to be open. And so the 2 engineers, which are them, go at it back and forth, back and forth. Well, how will you know that the dog will get out? And I'm like, well, then it got so deep. I started thinking about, okay, you could train them with like a dog whistle so that like every time they hear the whistle, they run outside the door. And so then the fire alarm, I had it all worked out. So then when the fire alarm alerted, it only alerted to that whistle sound. So you could train your dog, oh, there's that alarm. I have to go outside. But anyway, bottom line is my friend never did it. He said, no, you guys are going to love this. He said no one would pay that much money for that. And I said, you're so wrong. If I went to Home Depot right now and there was there could be 100 fire alarms. And one of them told me that when the fire alarm went off, my doors would all open up. Sign me up right now. I would sign up. So, but he told me nobody would ever do it. I had no idea candles are bad for dogs. Carrie, could that be? Tracy, yes. I didn't know. I should have asked you. Yes, absolutely. Stop burning anything in your house. Hi, everybody. This is Tracy, as you're seeing. She's a client of mine. She has little Sadie, and she's having seizures, and we're dealing with it. Tracy, I'm so sorry that I didn't bring that up. I feel like I always bring that up always when someone's talking to me about seizures, absolutely anything you are burning in the house can cause seizures. Especially for a dog who's already having a little bit of prone stuff like that. Any candles, um, anything, even the little plugins, those kind of things can cause seizures. So please stop. Let's stop that. That's awesome. Oh, so glad we talked about fire tonight because I'm so worried about little Sadie, and she's going to be boarding with me pretty soon. So I'm a little scared about that. I'm not scared, but I just don't want her to have another seizure. Wouldn't it, Lily? Thank you. I'm like, come on. Yes. Seriously, raise your hand if you would buy that fire alarm. Absolutely. I wish. How great would that be if I had that at the spa? Like if we had a fire, then all the doors just open on their own. And so we could just be running and getting our cars and getting them all worked up. But he was not going to do it. And he says, then he also told me that and he's not wrong, it would be millions and millions of dollars for him to start it and do the protocols and do all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, even cleaning, like Lily's saying, Tracy, cleaning products, all of those things can cause it. We're starting to slowly, Tracy's such a good mommy. You guys have no idea. And she's going to Hawaii and so nervous because Sadie's been having these seizures. So, and I'm going to be taking care of her. Using them again weeks ago, and then she had her seizure. Oh my gosh. Okay, only reason why I'm happy is because this could be this fingers crossed could be, and that'll be a good thing too if we take her over to the spa and she doesn't have one. And I'm so sorry, Tracy, that I didn't even think to say that because a lot of times when I have dogs who are having seizures, I try to, I can't even say always now. I try to say, make sure you're not burning anything in the house, nothing like that. Rosemary, absolutely. I was just about to say that. Rosemary, I think we already talked about that, Tracy, was the rosemary, but Lily's right. Making sure there's no rosemary bushes or rosemary in the house or using any kind of, Tracy doesn't use any flea or tick or anything like that. For those of you guys who are helping us out with this, she doesn't use any of that. We've already gone down that road. So we're just trying to figure it out. I know, me too. I'm so glad. I try to remember everything. But yeah, absolutely stop burning all candles, anything, incense, candles, anything that smells, can spark a dog to have a seizure. So that would be such a blessing if that's the answer to all of this. So we just got her diet. She was on a fabulous diet, but we're changing her onto a different protein to see if that's going to be it. So okay, so boarding, daycare, grooming, we talked about making sure that you're asking how many people are there, what their fire safety is, what the one other thing that we were going to talk about, somebody brought up in the beginning of this that we kind of would be remiss if we didn't talk about, right? Because it's all about the safety of yeah, I would keep her on the CBD until, we can figure it out. It's not going to hurt her. Definitely don't stop the CBD. So when we're talking about this, the whole purpose of this, right, is to make sure your animals are safe in boarding and daycare and grooming facilities. So I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the other things that can affect your dog's safety when they're going into these facilities. And those are going to be the over vaccinations of dogs. And you heard me earlier say that I have a 2-week waiting period in order to bring your dogs to the spa on vaccines. And that's for a lot of reasons. One of them, as I mentioned, is the rabies. Sometimes dogs can get a rabies vaccine and then they can show signs of aggression or irritability. And that can happen off of any vaccine, but it can happen particularly off of the rabies vaccine. During the ice storm, does that affect seizures? It's hard to say. I would think that one's lesser, but it's like trying to pinpoint an allergy for a dog or for a person, right? I don't know what pollen is in the air. I don't know, like everybody's different. And so I wouldn't rule it out, especially because of the time, but I think it's more you're far more likely to be the candles than it is to be the gas, but it's possible. I found a natural remedy to help with rabies vaccines. Do share. So vaccines, when you need to board your dogs or take them to doggy daycare, or some groomers even insist on having like a rabies vaccine. Those things are going to start playing a little role in your dog's health. So you want to make sure that wherever you're boarding your dog, make sure, number one, that they have a waiting period. And the reason for that, and I'm going to use Sadie hopefully as an example. So Sadie, I don't think Tracy will care. Tracy won't. You don't care if I use Sadie as an example. Oh, I could take Sadie out of it. So let's just say I have a seizure dog that's boarding with me in a couple of weeks because her mom's going to Hawaii. So if I have a seizure dog boarding with me, and or a dog with diabetes or a dog with heart problems or those kind of things, and you bring your dog in, thanks Tracy, and you bring your dog in who was recently vaccinated with parvo and distemper and bordetella and all of those, particularly parvo and distemper, those are shedding vaccines. And so now little Sadie, who we're trying to figure out what's going on with her seizures and whatever, you're just walked in the door with a dog who is possibly shedding this all over the environment. So you want to make sure that wherever you're boarding, we can get into whether or not now boarding facilities often, just so you know, there is no regulations. There's what they call regulations, but they're a joke. In California, the regulations are that I think you have one person in the room. It doesn't matter how many dogs, but there's very little regulations. They don't have any regulations on how you clean the place. They don't have any regulations on what you use to clean the place. They don't have any regulations on how often you clean the place. They don't have any regulations on how many people per dog. Nothing. Whether somebody's there at night, there's no regulations. It's ridiculous. So what training we have, nothing. But what they do tell you is that I have to require, in order to keep in some pet food, it's used as a preservative. So rosemary extract a lot of time is used as a preservative in food, and so is vitamin E. Those are just preservatives, but I would not feed that to my dog at all. Truthfully, anytime a dog food needs a preservative, it's usually something right off why does it need a preservative? Is something to kind of stay away from, but that is why rosemary's in there. So when you're looking at the vaccine issues and making sure, so if you're calling a doggy daycare and they don't have a waiting period and you can get your dog vaccinated on Monday and drop him off Monday night, then they're not paying close attention to the environment in which your animals are being boarded in. You're welcome. So you want to make sure there's a waiting period. I personally legally only have to require, in order to have my kennel license. Now, most boarding facilities will tell you that they have to require all these vaccines. I cannot tell you about the whole country. I can only tell you about my county for sure. But my county only requires the rabies vaccine. And then I have to, it's strange, back to no regulations. I have to ask the parents if they've had the parvo. So, which is weird. Like the parents can say they had the parvo, but they have to prove that they had the rabies vaccine. So really the only thing that I have to require is the rabies vaccine. Bordetella, the flu vaccine, the Lyme disease, the rattlesnake vaccine, like all of those vaccines are not required in order for me to have my license. I think that's pretty nationwide, but you have to check with your area. But most boarding facilities will say, oh, I have to require all of these in order to have my license. I don't think that most people even know what their license requires. So they're either A, lying to you just to make it happen, or B, they really don't know. And so they just assume that that's what they need. Because I don't have to require bordetella, I absolutely do not. I don't recommend it. Yes, I haven't had anybody do it yet. So I actually only require parvo as a puppy. And then a titer is really all I need. So if somebody got a parvo nose dose, then I could take that as well. But no matter what, I'm going to require a 2-week waiting period. And there's a couple of reasons. One, I want, if that dog is going to have any reaction, like I said, rabies can cause a reaction for weeks where they're acting a little bit differently. So if they're going to have a reaction, I want it to be at home in your house. So that you can be there with them. The last thing you want to do is get a call from your boarding facility that says, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. You just dropped your dog off and he's having some crazy reaction and you're at, LAX about to hit a flight. So 2-week waiting period always. That's not just for the environment. Like I mentioned, Sadie's going to be boarding with me here pretty soon, and she's a seizure dog, and I need to keep my environment clean with no shedding viruses, but also for your own dog. So let's just say you're watching this and you are so scared about that flu virus and you want to get the flu vaccine. if that's what you're concerned about, then you need time. Your dog needs time in order for him to build up antibodies. So there's no point in shooting him up and sending him into a stressful environment. So you really want to make sure that your boarding facilities are having that 2-week waiting period. Side effects can show up they absolutely can. But when they are showing up in most commonly, I'm going to see it within the first couple of weeks. But you're right. I mean, rabies vaccines can show up for months. And no one thinks that it is from that. But the first 2 weeks is usually, and it's also because I want your dog to build the immunity against what you were hoping to protect your dog from. Plus, your dog's going to be in a stressful environment, guys. Like, it's not home. It's not home. As much as I love Sadie and Sadie loves me and we know each other very well, thank God. That's the other thing. You really want to build a relationship with the last thing you want, guys, is to have to take your dog to a boarding facility on the emergency and you don't know them and you haven't built a relationship. And that's one of the reasons why I don't want you guys to walk away from this going, oh my God, I'm never taking my dog to another boarding facility or daycare ever again. You would be really benefit from getting in a relationship with either a boarding facility or somebody, because you do not want to find out one day there's an emergency and you just have to call little Joe Schmo and drop your dog off there. Your dog doesn't know him or her. It doesn't know where he is, all of those things. So you really want to make sure you're building relationships. Even bringing a new dog home here, I give them a month quarantine. It's not easy, but they all have to be protected. Yep. It's important and it makes a huge difference in their lives. So I really encourage you guys to look into these things that when you're looking into these facilities, even if you're bringing them home, just like Crystal said, you want to make sure you have a little quarantine part, because you don't know, a lot of stuff doesn't show up. We all learned that with COVID, right? People are walking around perfectly fine and 2 days later they're sick as dog and you've already been exposed. There's nothing you can do. Boarding facilities we don't know either. We don't have, it's not like they walk through sort of like a metal detector. Whoop, the flu virus. I wish, wouldn't that be, somebody should design that. You have to walk through that before you go into any place. So we would know, but we don't know either. And then sometimes, and that's the other reason why you want to make sure that your boarding facility or daycare facility has a quarantine room, not just a safe room, but a quarantine room. So let's say that somebody's boarding their dog with me and they bring them in on Friday and mom jumped on a plane, took off, went to Hawaii. And then on Sunday, her dog starts showing signs of kennel cough. What do I do? What does the boarding facility do? Most boarding facilities, there's nothing they can do. They just sit there in the general population, even though they didn't contract it there, because it wouldn't have happened that soon. They contracted it out on a walk or the neighbor's dog, or maybe they recently got vaccinated. So they need to have a quarantine room for those situations. And I do have one. If I have to use it, I will use it, where I have to take a dog and call the owner and say, unfortunately, we're going to have to quarantine your dog because he's got a little cough. I've had to do that before. So you want to know that, because you don't want to expose your dog, especially an older dog. Kennel cough isn't deadly unless you have a really old dog who has, heart problems or diabetes or all of these things, and then they end up with pneumonia. So these are questions that, I've thought about it, and someday I'm going to do it. Those A ratings on like restaurants where you see like the A rating. I want to form an organization that goes out and tests these boarding facilities. And then they would be rated by me and actually a girlfriend of mine who's a vet. We've talked about it for years. I'm like, I'm so tired of these boarding facilities and these daycares and these grooming shops. And you guys don't know what questions to ask or look for. Wouldn't it be great if I went and checked out your boarding facility and said, yeah, they passed, or they're going to pass, but they need to do this and they need to do that. And they need more staff and they need this. I need to do it. I just haven't. But there needs to be a place like that. And a lot of times people think that the licensing that they get is somehow protecting them. The people that are supposed to be checking out these facilities haven't been to my facility since way before COVID. And even before then, when they did come out, they didn't do anything. They literally did not do anything. One time a girl came out, thanks. If any of you guys want to get involved in it, I want to, because I'd love to go across the whole country and check places out and give them an A, B, C, D, E, F. I just fear that a lot of them would fail, or they would just hate me because I would make them do a lot more things. But now I forgot what I was going to tell you guys, because I got off of, because someone said I was amazing, and that was cool. And if my husband was here, I would tell him you said that. The only thing I know is dogs. I love working with them, and I see a huge problem, huge problem in this industry. And I don't know really what the solutions are, other than me coming up with something like that other facilities would help pay for. But I'm trying to think of all the things I was going to tell you guys. I think I pretty much covered a lot of the boarding and daycare problems. How many people, because I know we're coming up on an hour. I don't want to keep you guys too long. Kind of would be a gold standard. Yeah, it's what I'm hoping, is that I could do something like that. I just don't even know how to start something like that. Getting it going so that people wouldn't have to. So you guys could just be like, I'm not going to that facility unless it's been checked by whatever I would call the company. And then that way we would have our standards of staff to ratio. Because the other thing about staff to ratio that's a huge problem is if you are already dealing, I give this example a lot. If you're already dealing with a low staff, because it's people who own these, at least the individual, the small mom and pops, which is really the ones I like. Generally speaking, I like the small mom and pop ones. But if you're running a little small mom and pop place, you're not becoming a millionaire. So there's not a lot of money to be made at doing it. And so it can sometimes force people to get nervous about paying the rent, and then things happen. I don't know why I got off on that tangent, but looking at boarding facilities and what we can do to protect our dogs has to be in the forefront, because I don't think it's an option for everybody to just leave them home all day long. I have a lot of dogs that stay at doggy daycare for me, that if doggy daycare didn't exist, the dog would be at the pound. And, that's not a good option either. So we just need to find, have you in our lives. I've learned so much from you, Carrie. And thank you so much, Tracy. No, I learned, honestly, most of the stuff I learned is through you guys trusting me with your dogs. And then I've actually shared Sadie's story before on here. I don't know if you've been on here, but I shared Sadie's story. A lot of the guys that are listening right now, if you haven't heard, when Sadie had her first seizure, Tracy took her to the vet. And right away, the vet was like, oh, it might be a seizure. And then told her she should do the rabies vaccine right after. It was crazy. Tracy was so like, I can't even believe she's like wanted to give my dog a rabies. It's awful. So I learn a lot from you guys. And then I try to share as much as I can so that everybody can learn and we can change, hopefully this industry, because it's not a good industry, but ask the questions that need to be asked. Just start with a business plan and fill in from there, and just necessary licensing, training, and so on. Yeah, I know. Start with a business plan. That's the problem. I don't want to start with a business plan. I just want to start it. I started the spa without a business plan. My husband, everybody laughs at that. I'm like, yeah, I just kind of was like, I like dogs. I got to get out of the vet world. I'm going to do something. Never give a sick dog. I know, right? Yeah. Me and Tracy talked about that significantly. It's crazy. It was really, really crazy that happened. So, all right, guys, if there isn't any questions, I'm going to probably head off air. I hope this didn't scare anybody, because I really do believe that doggy daycares and boarding facilities have a really good place. And we must advocate for our dogs. Absolutely. We have to be their advocate 100%. That's why I'm suggesting to you, whether you have somebody come into your house, whether you have a dog walker come to your house and walk your dog, whether you are going to a boarding facility, a grooming, a daycare, a veterinarian hospital. I know it can be particularly hard to question a veterinarian because somehow and sometimes rightfully so, you know who you are. If you're a vet listening to this, you know who you are. Sometimes rightfully so, we put these vets up on pedestals and some belong up there. I agree. But a vast majority of them do not belong up there. And so because we've put so many vets on pedestals, we don't question them. And I can tell you some of the most horrific stories I've seen have come from veterinarians. And so don't just think because a vet is involved that somehow your dog is in better. You have to advocate and ask the questions. I hope this has helped. I did do a podcast on this that is on this podcast, and it was all the questions to ask your boarding, your grooming, your daycare. And so if I missed any here, I know I was mostly paying attention to finding out if you have somebody who's complacent and what safety protocols they have in. As far as disease, I run HEPA filters 24/7. I also would not board my dog in a place that is not running HEPA filters constantly to make sure that the place is clean. Also depends on how they're cleaning the facility. Like, are they just mopping? That's gross to me, like so disgusting to me to think that you can have that many animals peeing and pooping in the same place and then you just run a mop over it. They should be extracting and using shop vacs to extract out all of the stuff. Sniff mats, as far as what, Lily, you mean as far as like their food in the sniff mat? Like, I think that's what you're talking about. If that is what you're talking about, I think anytime an animal can be stimulated with their mind on eating their food, I think they're great. I think it depends on your dog, though. Some dogs can show a little bit HEPA filters. I use Allen air purifier HEPA filters. So, and they have several different ones. I have like 9 of them at the spot, and they run 24/7. And I even have the HEPA filters because you can get a new filter. And that's the other thing. How often are they changing their filter? I can like I have a HEPA filter. How often do you change it? Oh, I don't know. I'm like, I know. Mine get changed every 3 months. Recommendation from the Allen air purifiers is every 6 months. I change mine every 3 months. I don't want a dog to get sick. And if they do, I want it to be not because I didn't do something. I want it to be because it happened and there wasn't anything I could do about it. Oh, to stimulate brain. Yeah, absolutely. The sniff bath. Anything that can stimulate your dog's thinking, hunting, just in general to keep that brain going. We are seeing more and more. Carrie, can you speak about interviewing a pet sitter? Yeah, I will. I was going to talk about the sniff mats real quick. I can't tell you how many more dogs nowadays than back in the day do I see with dementia. And I really, truly believe it's because more and more and more and more our animals are just sitting around. We're spending more time on social media. And my own poor little dog is sitting right here to the left of me. And I shouldn't say poor little dog. The poor little dog gets to go to doggy daycare all the time. But I don't think we're doing enough to stimulate their mind. And so we're seeing a lot of dementia. A lot. I think I think the same reasons it's happening to our humans is the same reason it's happening to our dogs. Too much sugar, too much carbohydrate, too much junk food, and not enough mind stimulation, right? That's what happens with our older people, unfortunately. They get older, they sit down, and they stop thinking and using their brain. And then they gorge themselves on candy and cookies and sugar and become that. And then dementia sets in. So yeah, stimulate the brain. Absolutely. 100%. A fear of strangers and truck noises. So I thought I'd sniff mat might help. It might help for sure. For sure. Yeah. Dementia. I have a dog with me right now. He's a foster dog and he has dementia, but I didn't get it. I just got him a couple weeks ago and I don't think I can reverse it. Even though we're trying to stimulate his mind as much as possible. So interviewing pet sitters or dog walkers. Okay. Number 1, pet sitters or dog walkers. I would ask a dog walker first and foremost, how is she walking your dog? What kind of walking lead? How many dogs is she walking? You get these pack dogs, which I'm not going to necessarily say is a bad thing, but it's definitely comes with its risks as well, right? I love pack walks. I think it's great when you have all these dogs and they're trained, but what ends up happening, here's what I'll tell you guys about people who work with animals. A lot of what I do and how I work with animals is very instinctual for me. It's very, no one ever had to teach me. I learned how to deal with dog behavior on my own. It was just an instinct of mine. So you get a lot of these places who open up and the owner or the dog walker, which is we're going to be talking about, it can do a pack walk because they instinctually know, but then they start getting so big that they start hiring people to do their pack walks. Now you have people who really like the idea of it, maybe they're not instinctually good at it. So that's really hard. You want to ask how many. Um, Truthfully, I think that I wouldn't want somebody out doing pack walks with my dogs that didn't have more than 2 years experience doing it. Anything less than that is I think the longer you're doing it, the more incidences may have occurred that you learned from. Like I said, I don't think people a lot of times don't learn until it's happened to them, which is unfortunate because I've always been an advocate of just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean that it's not. Be smart. So, find out what kind of leash they're using, what they're doing, how they're walking. If they're walking them on retractable leashes. A lot of times people don't even ask that. And I see dog walkers all the time on retractable leashes. I'm like, are you kidding? You're a professional dog walker. Why are you what? So find out what kind of leashes they're using. And then you have to decide for yourself. There's so many of them. There's pinch collars, there's choke collars, there's harnesses, there's slip leads, there's all sorts of ways to walk dogs. I'm not going to get into the politics of it necessarily. If you want to ask straight out my opinion, I'll tell you, but be comfortable with what type of lead they're using or walking your dog with. That's important. Where are they going? How are they getting the dogs from point A to point B? Are they picking up a bunch of dogs in a van and then going to a park and then letting them run free at a dog park? If that's the case, I would run. So you got to know all of that. And then if you're taking my dogs to a dog park, maybe you're okay with that. Maybe you're okay with them going to the dog park. I would really, really caution you not to do that because she can't not only control that many dogs at a dog park, but and I've seen that where dog walkers go around, they pick up 7 or 8 dogs and then they take them down to the dog park. And then they, one by one, I've seen it happen one by one. You think your dog's being walked. And in reality, she's just hanging out at the dog park on her cell phone. And they take him down to the dog park. They leave the rest in the van, and then they take one into the dog park and release it, then go back to the van. And then they just keep doing that until all 10 of their dogs or 7 of their dogs are in the dog park. And then they go in and they sit down and then they play on their cell phone while your dog runs around. Then they come back, get them all at home and tell you that they took your dog for a walk. So you got to be really careful. Like, what are they doing exactly with your dog? Where are they walking? What is the route that they're walking? And what are they going to do in case of an emergency, in case the dog gets off the leash, in case a neighbor's dog comes running out at them and the dog gets off the leash? Know what they should be doing and how they're going to do it. And that's why it's important to know what route they're going at all times. So in case, like, let's say you didn't know, she goes a different route all the time. I would want my dog walker to be on the same route in case one day I get a phone call and she says, hey, I was out on Walnut and Franklin, and you know it because that's the place that you go, the route, and your dog got off leash. Well, now you know where to go to look for your dog. So those are things that, people don't think to ask their dog walkers. Where are you going with my dog? I want to know the exact route in case my dog gets off leash. So ask those questions. Ask how long they've been doing it. And I really would be careful anything less than 2 years. And that doesn't mean 2 years as a dog walker. I had a really great girl working for me a long time ago. Her name is Ashley. And she started her own dog walking company, but she had worked for me for about 2.5, 3 years before she started that company. And she was great with dogs. I mean, just amazing with dogs. And she could take some big dogs and those kind of things. So those are the questions I was at. If you want a shoulder replacement, use a retractable leash. Yeah, no kidding, right? One-on-one, me only. Yeah. So those are questions that I would ask my dog walker. Let me recap that. Where are you going? How many dogs are you walking? How long have you been doing this? Do they know where the emergency room is? Anybody in charge of your dog should know where the emergency room is. Now let's think about that. If you have a dog walker who's out walking and she walks your dogs 3 miles a day and she parked her car at point A and the accident happens at 2 miles out, and she falls and whatever, and your dog gets off. So these are all, like, I'm not trying to scare you guys, but there's stuff you want to know. You want to know where they're going, why they're going. I wouldn't want my dog walker walking out on main streets at all, in neighborhoods or in park areas, those kind of things. But I wouldn't want my dog walker walking out for those of you who live by me, out on Jamboree Boulevard, because things can happen. Dogs can get away. But that might be a little paranoia. When my staff walks dogs at the spa, this is another thing I would insist for my dog walker, 2 leashes. Years and years and years and years ago, when I was working at a vet hospital, remember I told you, I always tell my staff, it's not because I think it will happen, it's because I know it will happen. Years ago, I was working for a veterinarian, and one of the techs took a golden retriever out to go for his walk, and the leash broke and the dog went running out into the street and he got hit by a car. So when my staff walks dogs, we double leash always because I'm paranoid. We double leash our dogs when we walk them. So if I had somebody walking my dog, I would be like, I'd really like you to double leash them for my own sanity in case the leash breaks. I want to make sure my dog's not running away from you. I would want my dog walker to walk with some kind of protection. Absolutely. In case of a coyote, especially if you're in Southern California, in case of a coyote, in some cases, maybe a bear. I would insist that my dog walker is walking with some form of protection for my animal, as well as themselves, right? Like if a coyote comes and attacks, make sure that your dog walker is protected, or the neighbor's Rottweiler comes. I don't mean to throw Rottweilers out. But the neighbor's dog comes running out of the garage at the most inopportune time and goes after. So I hope that helped. I think those are the questions that I would want to make sure that dog walker knows where the emergency room is. My dogs have a fear of strangers and truck noises. So I thought, oh, the sniff mat. I'm sorry. I'm just going back over stuff. So, all right, guys, I hope this was helpful. I hope it didn't panic you guys. I hope you will still look into doggy daycares. They really are good. We talked a little bit about dementia and, it's stimulating. Some of our senior dogs, I have some people who will bring me their senior dogs just once a week, just so their dog gets some activity that's different than just the home because it's stimulating. So I hope that you'll recognize that there's probably millions and millions of dogs that go to doggy daycare and boarding facilities in this country every day. And very few of them are, getting injured, but it is happening. It is something we need to talk about. But far more dogs benefit and from the experience than not. Also, most of the injuries that are happening in doggy daycares and boarding facilities are cuts and scrapes because the dogs are playing with teeth and sharp, their sharp teeth and stuff like that. I like chasing roadrunners around my backyard. Oh, yours are lucky. They get to chase roadrunners. How fun. Oh, that would be so fun. Yeah. So please don't be afraid of stuff like this. Make sure that you get your dogs as much stimulation as you can, whether that is at your own backyard chasing roadrunners, a sniff mat, doggy daycare, boarding facilities, but just be smart about it, guys. I don't want to hear about another dog dying in one of these facilities when I think it can be prevented. I don't want to say that it can't. Sometimes it can't, but sometimes little injuries can't be prevented, but we definitely can do better. So that's why I wanted to talk to you guys about, because it sat pretty heavy on my heart the whole time this gentleman was telling me about the little dog that just lost his life. I feel so awful for the owners. I wish I could give them a hug. I can't imagine losing my dog that way. It's just awful. But it was sitting with me. And when things sit with me, I think, okay, I need to talk to other people about this and get this information out there and see if I can prevent another dog from getting injured. And even if nothing comes of this, and maybe you just happen to go to a doggy daycare one day and ask these questions, and it gets one doggy daycare to think twice about what they're doing, then we've all succeeded as far as I'm concerned. So anyway, I hope this helped you guys. I am going to be on here at 5:00 every Wednesday. Sometimes I'll have guests. Sometimes I'll talk to you about what's going on. I think I'm about ready to do another one. I think next week. I haven't decided yet, but I think next week I'm going to be talking about the skin microbiome. If you haven't already heard it, I did an episode. Dr. Judy Morgan hosts a podcast now, and I was so fortunate. I can't tell you how excited I was. I'll probably talk about it till forever. She asked me to come on and talk about the skin microbiome, and I did an episode with her, but she does 30-minute episodes, which are great for quick listening. But I wanted to get so much deeper into helping with this itchy, sticky dogs. Sticky is not the word I wanted to say, but your dogs when they're just itching and scratching and paw licking and all of this stuff. So I wanted to dive a little bit deeper. I know I did one a while back on the ear. canal and teaching you guys about how to prevent ear infections. But I think I'm going to do one on the skin microbiome so I can dive a little bit deep, and that'll probably be next week, next Wednesday. But I think I'm going to be spending a lot more time talking about some of the issues that I personally face because of the trenches that I'm in. So I hope it'll be beneficial to you guys. I hope you can learn a lot from me. I have tons and tons of time spending with your animals that have been able to teach me. And so I'm just excited to be here for you guys. I will see you guys next Wednesday. Okay. You guys take care. Oh, I almost forgot, and I can't forget this because without her, none of us would be here. So I just want to thank Lori. She's behind the scenes. She's the one that posts all the stuff up for you. I know some people that do these are so quick they can type it in, like Dr. Katie Woodley. Oh my gosh, she's just like, I don't know how she does it. She types her stuff in so fast. I can't do it. So Lori types everything for us, making sure you guys have everything. And she's the one that gets us all set up. And she's great. She actually has a company called Allied Exchange. If you have a business or you're looking into using somebody to help you with your social media, I highly recommend her. But I don't want to say more importantly, but equally as important, I just want to thank you guys. Thank you guys for being here, for helping each other out. I think it's so important. Lily, thank you so much for talking a little bit about Rosemary and helping Tracy with little Sadie. It's so important. If you guys weren't here, think about this. Crystal, if you hadn't mentioned the fire, we wouldn't have talked about the candles. And if we wouldn't have talked about the candles, then Sadie would still be breathing candles and she's having seizures. So, oh my God, how amazing was that? I love when communities come together to help each other out. So thank you guys so much for being there. Georgianne, thank you for everything. I hope that helped you with the dog walkers, and I will see you guys next week. Okay. Take care, everybody.